Hi everybody, and welcome back to the Tom Morgan Drum Studio. Well, today is an exciting day because we're going to take eighth notes and learn them today. But before we do that, I want to just go back and look at page 14 in the book, which we talked about in our last video. It was a little note speller for you to fill in some blanks. So I just want to make sure you have the right answers here. So let me just show you the book. And like this example, we have a whole note, which gets 4 counts. And then this is a half note. So you'd write half note here, 2 counts. Quarter note would be written here, 1 count. Quarter rest, 1 count. The half rest, because the rest is sitting on the line, so it gets 2 counts, and the whole rest, which is hanging from the line, gets 4 counts. So if you needed to hear those answers, there they are. And we'll just jump down to the bottom of this page, and hopefully you have the book, and you can look down at the bottom of page 14, and you'll see a very important diagram there that you really kind of have to have in your head. And it shows the notes in relation to one another. And now we know why the whole note is called a whole note. It's because it's the largest note. And all the other notes are fractions of the whole note. So you see, if you cut a whole note into 2 parts, you have 2 half notes. And so they're there underneath the whole note. And then if we cut the whole note into 4 equal parts, we'll have quarter notes, which is the 3rd line there. And now we're going to do it again. We're actually going to cut the whole note into 8 equal parts. And so each 8th note is an 1/8 of a whole note. Each quarter note is a quarter of a whole note, and so on. So let's look at our little diagram board here. And I've written up here, again, a quarter note that gets 1 count. A number and an and. Remember, our definition of a count is a number and an and. Okay? So if a count is a number and an and, then a half a count is going to be just the number by itself, or just the and by itself. And this is where our definition of a count being a number and an and is really going to be helpful to us. Because now when we start talking about 8th notes as getting half a count, now we can really understand what that means. A half a count is just a number or an and. So up here we have 2 8th notes, and these are the way 8th notes look when they're just written singly, like this. They have the little flag here. And so in this case, this one would get a half a count, just the number, whatever number it happens to be. I just put 1 there. And then this one is getting the other half of the count, which is and. Now, when there are more than 1 8th notes together, and it's possible to do this, we beam them together. This is called a beam. And it makes it easier to read the 8th notes. If you can imagine 4 8th notes that were all separated and had flags like this, your eye wouldn't necessarily instantaneously catch how many of them there are. But when they're beamed together, sometimes in 2s, sometimes in 4s, it's much easier to pick out, oh, that's a group of 4 8th notes. So in here we have 1 and 2 and. Also, the way these are written like this dates back to the time when people wrote all their music by hand. And it takes a lot less time to write 4 8th notes and just draw a line across them than it does to write 4 8th notes and put this little flag on each one. So that's another reason why this became the norm. So on page 15, you see there some 8th note exercises. And we have 3 different exercises there. And if you just scan the page, you'll notice that all the 8th notes on this page are in groups of 4 or 2. They're beamed together in groups of 4 or 2. And that's not the only way that we'll see eighth notes occurring, but to get started on this page, that's the way they're used. So get used to seeing eighth notes in groups. You don't have to look at every individual eighth note when you're reading. If you see them grouped together in groups of 2 and 4, you can see those groups, and it's very much the way we read words. When you read a novel, you don't look at every individual letter of every individual word. You see the letters grouped in familiar groups, and you see them as a group rather than as individual letters. One reason people have a hard time reading music, I'm convinced, is that they may be looking at every individual note instead of training themselves to see notes in recognizable groups. I call them rhythmic words. So right from the start here, when we do this page, we want to try to see the eighth notes in groups of 4 and 2. So the first one's in 4/4 time. And so whenever you see a group of 4 eighth notes in 4/4 time, you know it's either going to be 1 and 2 and or 3 and 4 and. Those are our only 2 possibilities. But some of them are groups in 2 as well. So let me play line 1 on page 15, and I'll count out loud and play through it. Notice it's a 4-line exercise. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right. So that's line 1 or exercise 1. And let's go on to number 2. Number 2 is in 2/4 time. And so remember, the top number of our time signature tells us the number of counts in a measure. So now there's 2 counts in a measure. So now if you see 4 eighth notes beamed together, it's going to take up the entire measure of 2/4. So this is a 2-line exercise. So let me do exercise 2. 1 and 2 and 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 1 and 2 and. And notice there in the second line, third measure, there's a whole rest in that measure. And remember what we said before, that a whole rest can be used in any time signature, and it simply means a measure of rest. So in this case, it gets 2 counts because we're in 2/4 time. All right, and then finally we're on exercise 3, 3/4 time. And so now we're going to see measures like the first 2 where we have 2 beamed groups, a group of 4 beamed together and then 2 beamed together. And then the second measure is the reverse of that, 2 beamed together and then 4 beamed together. They're all eighth notes, they're all played evenly, or they're all going to get a half a count. But we're beaming them together like that just to make it so your eye can pick out the pattern and not be confused. So here we go, exercise 3. 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 all right, and that's all we'll do for today. One last point. Notice that when I'm playing, I'm keeping my sticks pretty much in the same place, using mostly wrists, maybe a little forearm. And when I have a rest, I'm not putting a pulse. Sometimes I've seen students, if there's a rest, like 1 and 2, or they'll go 1 and 2 and 3 and or something like that. That's a bad habit to get in. Try just to let your hands remain in the same spot if you're not playing for a count. So 1 and 2 and 3 and or whatever it is, so that you don't add an extra little pulse in there with your hands. If you're not doing that, then don't worry about it, but it's common enough that I thought I'd throw that in. All right, very good. That gets us started with eighth notes. Please subscribe to this video and like it, and watch for the next one as we move through a sequential approach to fundamental snare drum. All right, thanks a lot. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.